Welcome, fellow travelers to Fate's Wide Wheel. I'm your host, Sam Fain, and I am thrilled to once again be joined by none other than Caitlin Bassett, who plays Addison Augustine on Quantum Leap. Caitlin, hello, how are you? Welcome back.
Oh, thank you, Sam. I'm so excited to be back. How are you?
I'm doing well, I'm busy, lots of stuff going on, but it's all good. And my show opens tonight, so, I'm thrilled about that. And it's an extra special day because I get to talk to you. So I'm just so excited that, we could make time for this and talk about season 2, because there's a lot to talk about. The last time that we spoke, season 2 was about halfway through. So obviously so much happened since then. I'm just really looking forward to kind of digging in and talking more about that. Before we do, what have you been up to? What's going on in your world right now?
Oh, good Lord. Since the show ended?
Yeah.
um, I'm just kind of taking a beat. I came to see some family. I'm just kind of trying to absorb it all and digest it and process it and kind of figure out where we go from here, regardless of which way everything goes. So, um, you know, the show started in 2022 and then it never stopped until the strike, which was just mayhem of a moment, right?
Yeah.
And then we went back and finished it up. So I honestly feel like this is the first time I kind of have a moment to deeply reflect on the entire experience, which has been, I mean, so amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just taking a knee right now, and I have some of my own projects that I'm trying to work on, more in the military sphere.
Oh,
I really
cool.
want to kind of start becoming a storyteller in that world as well. So yeah, just trying to figure out who Caitlin is now, which is really
That's
exciting.
That's awesome. That's so cool. I love hearing that. A good friend of mine from college, he was in the Marines,
Mhm.
and of course we were, in theater together. And
That's
he'd
funny.
been
That
discharged, and
that means a completely different thing in the military because theater also means
what? Right?
like deployment.
Yes,
So that's so funny. I was like, wait,
yes.
which theater? Hold on. Were you in the military and I didn't know that?
No, that definitely would have come out beforehand. No, no,
Yeah.
no, yeah, no. But after he'd been medically discharged, he, found his way to the theater department, and so we were in theater together, and we were really good friends. And then he went on, and he has done some amazing big things. And one of the first things that he did too was try to find ways to kind of like connect his earlier, military career with, his new acting career, and providing like theater, on bases, and doing things to just kind of connect, the art to the soldiers and stuff, which I always thought was so
It's
fantastic.
so important. It's so important. And yeah, that's kind of like the phase I'm in. I'm reaching out to veteran groups and I just set a date to do like a class for actors that have been veterans and transitioning into acting. And then, it's such a thing. I felt so healed and there was so much growth that happened for me personally on my transition to be an actor from the military. And I would really like to find a way to share that and also, get some military service like members to be storytellers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it would change the landscape a little bit. And there's such a high bar to entry in this industry. So it's definitely one of my like passions, not only helping veterans in that community, but also um, making that pipeline a little bit more accessible. Because to break into this industry, you just have to be okay with being poor for a very long time, and that's very hard to do, especially for people who aren't 22. You know,
Absolutely.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a deep passion of mine, and I'm kind of adjusting to see where I can fit in that space, and hopefully I can make a difference. I don't know.
I love that. I love that you're exploring that. I love that you're getting the opportunity to do that. And I hope that it goes very, 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 very far, because it's admirable, for sure. And I
Oh,
think it's necessary. It's necessary.
yeah. If people who break through don't take the time to like turn around and figure out how to keep those doors open, then you're just an exception. And I'd like
Yeah.
to be less of an exception.
Well, it's funny you think about the way that the world has changed so much, and the fact that after the Second World War, there were a lot of actors who had served, right, and there were a lot of people who then came out of the war and then found their way to Hollywood or whatever, and,
Yeah.
and there were stories being told that were very different from the stories that were being told during the war or immediately prior to the war, and I think that one of the reasons why that shift was able to happen is because you had actors who had clout and had these experiences now that could then bring those in, and I think that things have shifted even further obviously since then, but the idea that we've as a country, as a global community, experienced so much strife over the past 20 years in particular, and seen so many different wars breaking out and seemingly never ending, and to have the opportunity to get those perspectives and tell those types of stories, and be able to feel like not only are those stories being told in ways that feel immediate, but also we're supporting people that may need that support in some way, because as I'm sure you well know, having a creative outlet can absolutely provide a lot of healing and perspective for yourself and from within, and then that all comes without, which I think is something that storytelling is all about, to be able to share that.
Absolutely. I mean, heck, a lot of the movie making industry deeply reflects military structure, how how things operate on set. Like it's very clear to me that the military and people with military experience were deeply entrenched in the birthing of how these things work, right? It's clear. You can. I'm like, that's very familiar. It's very clear to me. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, and then the world. It's been a long time since the Second World War, and we went through Vietnam, which was a whole other way shift away from integration of any. You know what I mean? And then now we're
Yeah.
back, and now I think as a society we're in a weird place with our relationship with the military and what that means, and we're all exhausted with the never-ending war. So it's just there's a lot there, but that doesn't mean there's still not a lot of people who are left in the kind of dust of all of that, being like, well, what do I do now? How do
Right.
I get there? So anyway, none of that's about Quantum Leap. I'm sorry. You
Don't
can
be
leave
sorry.
that if you want, but yeah, it's a deep passion
No.
of mine, and I hope I can make a difference in that space because
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean, this is the type of conversation that I love. I love talking about Quantum Leap, but I love talking about this stuff too. I mean, I think that the most amazing thing about being able to have, the ability to talk to people like you, or getting to talk to Raymond, for instance. Like, I mean, we talked about clowning and theater for probably a good 30 minutes of that interview before we even talked about anything Quantum Leap related. So, to me, it's just the opportunity to be able to have these conversations. I hope is it's important to me. I hope it's important to the listeners. I hope it's important to you, and it sounds like it is. So I hope that
it is
happens. I hope
important
we
to
get
me.
the
I
chance to
could
do
talk
all those
about
things.
veterans all day. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
Well, I mean, you are one, and one of the things that has been really cool is seeing some of the stuff that you have posted on Instagram, including stuff from the time when you were serving in the military. But also, I guess, to segue into some Quantum Leap stuff, you posted something about a month ago, which I just loved seeing, and it was a video of the day that you found out that you've been cast in Quantum Leap. Um, and now, talking about having the opportunity to maybe take a little bit of stock, because you're not in this sort of like crazy, like, okay, we finished season one, we're right into season two, oh my gosh, there's an actor strike. It feels like you can kind of take a bit of a breath in a way. So looking back and reflecting on that moment in particular, what does it mean to you, and how do you feel about the growth of Caitlin the human being from that moment until now?
Oh man, I think I'm going to be dissecting that for years to come. Truthfully, look, I mean, there's always times of intense growth, but I can't name one that's been so clear and so intense. And I did watch
Yeah.
Ray's interview, and
Mm.
I saw it was nice to kind of see how he responded to the question of like when we found out we got a season two, and like we're going straight through, like that was very real. So from the moment that you saw, I mean, from the moment I found out that I was being screen tested, even I was like, really, me? Um, uh all the way to the chemistry read with Ray and And that moment where, yeah, like it was, what stands out the most for me in that moment, honestly, Sam, is that I got to call my mother, who's alive, and I had a friend that cared enough to take a video, right? Like, so many things in this world are so important. And this was so important. And I got the biggest opportunity I've ever had. And I did the best I possibly could with it, for where I was. But it's really special when you take stock and like, I got to tell my mom.
Yeah.
And I had a friend who cared. That's stuff that you got to remember is so important because that's not guaranteed.
Absolutely. I mean, it's it's one of those things that I know I've spoken with some of my actor friends about over the past 20 years that you try not to like go after that sense of validation, right? That your own self-worth, it comes from someplace other than somebody giving you a job. But at the same time, it is incredibly validating, and it is
validating.
and the opportunity like you say, to share
I wasn't insane.
Right. I didn't make a huge mistake. No, I think that that's incredible. And I also think that one of the things that I've loved about the conversations, that I've been privileged enough to have with you or with Ray or with Eliza in particular is the, the vulnerability and being able to share some of those moments, right? And being able to share some of those moments with this audience and not my audience. I'm talking about like, Instagram followers and that, and the world and that sort of stuff, because I think that sometimes, we don't get that same sense of vulnerability from people that are in that arena, that are in film and television, that things feel very structured and varnished and polished, and I'm going to answer this way or that way. And I think it's one of the reasons why it's so refreshing when for a while there we saw somebody like Jennifer Lawrence after she won her Oscar, just being herself, like wherever she went and do it, whenever she did interviews or whatever. It was just sort of like, it was kind of refreshing. It was just sort of like, oh yeah, great. It's not the same canned answer that we've heard 30 times or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with that. People have to promote shows and films, but I just appreciate the way that you shared that, because I know as, as a fan of a show, as a fan of you, I don't know, it moved me to be able to just see your joy and that sense of like, I did this thing, and now I got to go do this thing. And it was just incredible. Right.
Yeah. Now I gotta go do it. In fact, yeah, that's a constant every time. Like, really? You're saying yes? Shit. In fact, the class podcast, whatever it is, I'm going to give for the veterans, it's not just going to be for veterans, but it's the basic. The title is what happens when they say yes, because everybody talks about getting the job and how you get there, and managers and agents and auditions and tests and chemistry reads and contracts. And then nobody talks about what happens when they say yes, when you get that green light. Like, the closest I got was honestly Michael Caine's book. Because he has some really nice, like, he just has some really practical things that, yes, are applicable in other realms. So I think that's, plus he's Michael Caine, so people would,
right,
they just want to know everything that happened, all of it. They want, you know what I mean? And he grew, and it was like this wonderful time in Hollywood, and it was just, he's the best, and he's funny and charming and authentic. But yeah, there's just not a lot of information out there of like, what happens when they say go, especially if you haven't been around the block for years, like Ray has, where he's done a ton of co-stars, a ton of guest stars, a ton of recurs, a couple series regulars before he got, like, that man was so ready to take on a number one position on a show, as a person, as a father, as a husband, in every aspect of his life. He like, Ray was perfect. Like, I can't say it enough. And you said a lot about creating safe spaces, and he did. And I'm always going to be grateful for the rest of my life that Raymond Lee is the head of this show. He's just a different kind of person. But I'm starting in my crop, right? Like my colleagues, people that I was in the Disney Discovers showcase with, which has launched a lot of careers. They're starting to get these series regular jobs, these big jobs, and they're like, Caitlin, can we have coffee? And I'm like, yes, babe, we can have coffee. And it's going to be 3 hours. And I'm going to walk you through like what is about to happen to you. And so, yeah, I'm going to do it for veterans as well. Cause it's just, there's just not, but not just for veterans, for anyone. And I was like, I want it recorded. I want it out there so that 3 years from now, when some actor's like, what do I do now? I want them to find that video. So they can just have a little more preparedness. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's so fantastic. And it's funny you mentioned Michael Caine's book. I remember I was 15. I was in high school and I had just started to kind of like take theater and acting somewhat seriously. Like, I think I want to do this. And I had an acting teacher and I was in her office and she grabbed that book off the shelf and handed it to me. And she's like, read this, just read this. So good. Yeah. I'm lucky to have had people like that along the way. But yeah, I think it's incredibly important to be able to have people to give back and to use that knowledge that they've been able to gather and say like, hey, this is accessible. This is, it doesn't have to feel like it's such a closed, ecosystem, just sort of like feeding off of itself, that there can be, and, open doors to say like, hey, sure, maybe you're never going to like star in a TV show or a movie or whatever, but this is, this is what I have, and this is what I can show you that, that if that happens, you're more prepared for it. And now you have knowledge and I can share that knowledge.
Right. And like you were saying, just like kind of, there is a lot of canned answers that start to happen, and I get it because I've stepped in it a few times. Like, I wish sometimes I had just stuck with the canned answers or somebody had given me some. But and I have stepped in it multiple times, both on set and we all, it's nothing bad because it always came out of a good place. It always just came out of like, oh, sorry, that's not my job. That's your job. It just, and people sense that, like, people sense when mistakes are made, honestly, not like, some veil for some ulterior motive, which has never existed. I'm just like, how do I do it? How do I stand here? Okay, I'll do that. So, but just kind of being just being honest about it. And like, I don't know if that's the right way. It's like, one thing that Ray said in his interview that I did appreciate, and it is true. I work from a very honest place because that's just me as a human, right? Like, so I'm gonna make mistakes, but they're gonna be mistakes made out of like genuine gregariousness or something, like excitement. They're not gonna be, I trust myself in a sense of like, I know my motives are always very pure, so I'm just trying to figure it out. And so, maybe I do reveal too much. I don't know. Maybe I'm too honest and maybe that might bite me down the road, but it feels right for me. So I'm just going to go that route and see where that gets me.
I mean, I think that to me, that's the best way to be. And like, and when you are able to operate from that place where there is no ulterior motive, that you're not engaging in anything that's like manipulative or, that there's nothing going on behind that. I mean, I just think that first of all, that wouldn't be honest, right? That would be dishonest. So like, if you're just operating from a place of honesty and a place of truth, like, mistakes will be made, certainly. But at the same time, I think that, right. I think that that's the point, right? There's so, for instance, like the final scene of the finale, right? When Ray says, I won't, after you say, don't let go. And like, from some points of view, that could be a mistake, right? Because that wasn't in the script. Nobody told him to do that. He just did it, right? And yet, because it was from this place of honesty, because it was from this place of just like being in that moment and telling his truth, like it's so incredible, and it's this beautiful, beautiful moment. And I think that oftentimes, when you operate from a place of honesty, even if it is a mistake, it does have beauty to it. I think about music a lot of times, and they're like, you listen to some songs and some albums, and not so much these days, but there was a time when like mistakes would get left on the record, right? When like you would hear something and be like, oh, that wasn't supposed to happen there, but it's beautiful because it was something that was captured in the moment, and regardless of whether or not it was a mistake, there's a beauty to it because it's honest. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that whatsoever. And I appreciate your honesty. And you know, I mean, that's one of the things too, that I love about getting the opportunity to talk to you specifically, is that since the first time, you know, you came on, it was just, there was this earnestness, right? There was this, like, you know, this genuine, just human being talking to me, not somebody who was, you know, I have to appear to be this, and I have to, you know, respond in this fashion, you know,
there was no package.
which is great.
There still really isn't a package.
I mean, there can't be a filter, right? Like, the minute you put on a filter, like, people know, you know. So I appreciate it. You know, let's talk a little bit about season 2, because now that the whole thing is out there, and people have seen it, or people can stream it on Peacock right now, and they should, if they haven't already, which if they're listening to this, they probably have.
Yeah.
Exactly. Just turn your TV on, go to Peacock, go to Quantum Leap, hit play, leave the room, do your dishes if you need to, whatever, and just let it stream all day. So now that the whole season is out there, you know, we talked a lot last time that you were on the show about just the you know, the different directions that Addison was able to go, and the growth of the character, and that there seemed, you know, that there were much more, like, personal stakes being kind of grown throughout the course of the season, even in light of the fact that season 1 was all about, like, your fiance's lost in time and I have to try to get him back and what's going to happen. And yet this season somehow seemed to get even more personal. And as the season went on and progressed, and the storyline, you know, with Tom progressed, there was just so much stakes for you at home on the HQ side of things, but also on the Leap side of things, you know, with Ben. And by the end of the season, of course, it became very clear that in a lot of ways, this season was about Addison's growth and getting to be, you know, the hero in a lot of ways, and the person that's willing to make the sacrifice in the same way that Ben made the sacrifice, that Sam made the sacrifice. At what point, I'm curious, did it become kind of clear to you, or did you have any idea where things were going for the end of the season before reading Drew's script for Against Time?
I am pretty relentless on the writers. So I knew pretty early what the general plan was. Not that was official, or probably what Martin and Dean wanted me to know, but I did. So I knew pretty early that was kind of the general direction they were trying to go, but also, like, that wasn't approved. You know, that like NBC Universal could have been like, no, we don't really like that direction. We don't want 2 leapers. We don't want it to be hurt, like, whatever it is. So it was an interesting ride, because I knew the general area that they wanted me to go, but it wasn't completed, right? Like, it wasn't guaranteed. It wasn't locked. And there were some moments as she was walking down a path that people didn't want her to be walking down. That was pretty hard for me, because you know, it was just pretty scary, because I was constantly afraid we were going to do something with her that people wouldn't forgive. You know, I'm acutely aware of the what's her name on Breaking Bad, the Skylar effect.
Yeah.
And so I think I probably had a bit more fear than maybe I should have. Like, I think I needed to trust more, generally, as a note, as a person. Is something I can work on. But yeah, it was really scary, and I just had to kind of keep remembering that, like, these people really know what they're doing, and if they say they're going to bring her back, they're going to bring her back, and if they don't, then that must be the best thing for the story, right? You know, so it was pretty scary. And then when I saw the arc coming back, like the weight of it lifted. And it was really when I saw the episode 10 script. Maybe no, episode, I'm sorry. Well, yeah, episode 10 was when I was like, okay, they're turning the ship around a little bit. And that was really, it was one of my, it was one of the most fun episodes to shoot. It was also one of the hardest episodes to shoot.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was intense. But it was just because we were in the desert in a cave a lot. Like,
sure.
It wasn't necessarily because the material was, it was just the
right. No, I could imagine.
Yeah, but when I started to see her come back around, it was really exciting, and that's when I really started to really believe that this might happen, because
yeah,
it's hard to like to hold on to hope that like you might get to go be a leaper. This might be like the next step for this character. It was almost like too good to be true for a second, and so I just kind of, I just held it with a glacier of salt, and until I saw the script, and then I saw the script and I started crying. So
So I'm so glad that you mentioned episode 10, because to me, that was definitely the episode where I started to see things coming together for Addison as well. And really the character had been put through the ringer in a lot of different ways, for the previous 9 episodes. And there had been some incredible moments early on. And a lot of those moments were very engaging scenes between like you and Ray, and, Lonely Hearts Club being one of my favorites, where you tell him what was happening, what went down in those 3 years, and what that felt like for you. Kind of the incredible thing about episodes, I would say 10 and 12 in particular, is that we don't necessarily get those types of moments from Addison. And so you're not necessarily out there like delivering these powerful, pieces of dialogue. What struck me the most is the story that you were telling in silence. And episode 10, that moment in the caves when, the siblings are kind of over here having this conversation, and wisely, the camera's just focused on you. Like, and you're not saying a thing. You're not contributing to that conversation. You're telling your own story. And it was just such an incredible moment. And I'm curious, for you, where did you find that? Because obviously it's not necessarily something that's being assisted by the dialogue. Like, it's not something that involves the conversation that's taking place behind you at that moment. It's just a story that you're telling on your face. And I get that it's, clearly that there's something that you're acting to, in Ben, but it's just such a beautiful moment. And I would love to know, what your feelings about that particular moment were, and what your process was like in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, we had a long time to build it. Addison's story is now in me. And I, it sounds like cheating, but sometimes you just have to listen and think about the journey, and it, the story comes out. It was one of those moments where I didn't have to deliver something. I just had to exist in a moment of like, oh wait, oh, I can't do that. It's just, and what I loved about what they did there, because I was not a fan initially of what was happening with the engagement. I just felt like I was like, people aren't gonna like me. Now I'm hurting. Now Addison's hurting Tom too. Like, please stop. Please stop doing this to her. Please stop. Because Tom's a great character, and he I think if we'd gone 18 episodes, we would have gotten a lot more. And Peter's so good and has such depth to him. And I think an 18 episode season would have been a little different for Peter and Tom, which I think would have been really cool. But and who knows, James, Frain, and I are kind of becoming friends, which is really nice. And
that's awesome.
we're talking about character thoughts and things, and he pointed out to me that Addison has thoughts that sit very close to Caitlin's, but they're not exactly the same person.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes it's hard to differentiate if Addison didn't like want to hurt Tom or if Caitlin didn't. Like I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
But so that's kind of something I'm trying to figure out, you know, as a performer, how to handle that. But you know, because I just didn't want it to go into something too painful. But what I did love about it is that sometimes you have to make a decision to find out if it's the right decision, because sitting in limbo is just exhausting as a person. It gets you nowhere, and it has to be exhausting as an audience to watch. Like, it's just like, that's still that. So whatever is happening there, hopefully. And then as soon as she made a decision about it, we had this wonderful arc for her to see that wasn't the right decision. But would she have seen that if she hadn't already made the decision? Or would she still just exist treading water? And so I think it was really smart that they did that. And a lesson in character work and just acting for me. And so when that moment did come on camera, you know, I just had to exist as her for a little bit and exist as someone who was doing the best that she could. But sometimes things don't go the way you think, and just be okay with that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that one of the things that was so smart too, and this is something that, you know, talked about on the show before, is that the way that Tom was written and of course, everything that you mentioned about Peter and the depth that he brings to the role, I think it showed us two mature people making mature decisions and certainly having feelings about those decisions, but not reacting in a way that felt, you know, overly melodramatic or, you know, didn't feel mean-spirited in any way. There was no, how could you do this to me? I'm going to get you. You know, it was instead, it was just kind of pure and simple heartbreak. You know, it's like, this sucks and this isn't how I want this to be. But yes, I mean, I understand. And I think because that was kind of the perspective that we got, you know, ultimately from the character Tom, that it again, it kind of benefited in a way that Addison made this decision, and it was clear that, like, it sucked for you too. I mean, I think that was the other thing that was really nice. It wasn't as simple as saying, like, hey, we're not going to do this, I'm going to go do this other thing instead. You know, there was so much weight behind it. Yeah, peace out. So I mean, I would love to kind of just hear about I mean, to go back just a second, you know, the engagement and the proposal and Addison's just kind of like, yes, I'm going to do this. And it's funny because then there's kind of the follow up to that moment where we see the team reacting. And I remember as I was watching the episode, and I texted somebody during this moment, I was fascinated because everyone is being very supportive, but there was something about Ernie's performance and Magic, which is fascinating to me because Magic had been so supportive throughout all of this, but there was something about the way that he was playing it that was just sort of like, okay. And it was really interesting to me. I'm just curious about, like, that moment in particular and coming in and sharing that with the team and what shooting that scene was like, because you've got everybody in the room as you're doing this thing that, as you just said, like, Caitlin the actor wasn't 100% sure about, and now you're going in and you know, you're sharing this moment with these other actors, these other characters.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a lot to talk about in that scene, because that scene ended up a lot shorter than it was on the page. There was a ring moment. I was supposed to show someone a ring, and I kind of hated that because I was like, I don't know if she's in a place of like, oh my God, like with the frills. I don't know if that's where she is. But then me and Narissa worked out this beautiful little bit where, like, Nan, like, snatched my hand up and was like, and it was so funny. I couldn't, but then we had to lose the ring because we'd shot a bunch without the ring. And then I was like, what am I going to do? Have a ring and then not have a ring? It was a whole thing. We went around the bend on that scene. So just some inside baseball. There was, like, some really funny moments, just like set moments of, like, I literally walked up to the writers. I was like, so the bit about the ring, very funny. We didn't shoot the ring in any of the other things. So like, did she take it off? Is she like with Tom? You're like, thanks for the ring, babe. I'm gonna go talk to the other guy now.
Yeah.
Hold this one.
Can't wear this in the imaging chamber.
Yeah. And or are we gonna shoot a thing where I like sneakily take it off? Because that feels like a little, that's a choice. Like,
yeah, right.
So we 86 the ring. And it was in the box. Then it was just in the box, right. And then so that way Peter could hold, or his character could hold on to it, and we could all be fine.
Yeah.
So just inside baseball, funny how that kind of came together.
Yeah.
In the performance of it, it was so fun. Things I remember. Mason was mad because I didn't make eye contact enough with them, and they were trying to do something funny in the corner. Which was the best.
Yeah.
And then it was so fun because, and I think I hope we get to explore this in season 3, because the dynamics between how everybody is together is so fun. Like in that moment, who I felt was my biggest supporter was Jen/Nan Rissa, right? Like she was the one, like, Ben's not here. You know what I mean? Like there's some practicality to her. So one of my favorite things is when little alliances form, right? Like Jen and Ian were on an alliance for a lot. And then sometimes it's me and Jen. And then sometimes it's Magic and Jen. And sometimes it's me and Magic. And like, there's these like where we land in the same place and where we don't. So that's always very fun.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, Ernie was, I think he played more dad than he did boss in that moment. I think that's what was happening. He was watching someone who the character loves dearly, make a choice that he kind of knew wasn't necessarily maybe the best choice, but understood that it's the best choice she could make.
Yeah.
For where she was as a person, which I think is another, I mean, I say this all the time, but the show is such a lesson in love, because it's all about not necessarily loving someone for what they give to you, but loving them for where they are and what they were able to do in that moment, even if it's fail, and kind of being what they need, especially, that Addison's certainly been that for Ben. The whole show is she always has to be the version of her that he needs in that moment, not necessarily the version that she would like to be. So it's a lot of that, which was cool.
It's interesting, the family dynamics. It's not something, oddly enough, that I feel like I've talked a whole lot about. But you see the HQ team, and I mean this familial relationship has obviously developed over the course of these 2 seasons. And you do see like Magic is the dad, right? And like in Ian is clearly like the youngest sibling. Like clearly they are, like they're coming to like you for big sister advice. They're I mean it's lovely to see the way that the relationships the relationships have developed in that way, because there's obviously a lot of professionalism as well, and clearly everyone has their roles and their jobs that they have to do, and they're very good at that. But then the interpersonal relationships, you talked about you and Jen/Nan Rissa, and I feel like one of the things that's so great about that relationship is that there's just this very like even ground between the two of you. I feel like Jen would come to Addison for advice, Addison would come to Jen for advice. They would lean on one another, as needed. How, just out of curiosity, I'm not looking for like, all the juicy details or anything, but I am curious, like, how does that mirror or reflect the real life relationships that have developed between you and the cast?
I think they're all about right. Mason is Mason. Like when they step on set, you never know which way they're going to go, but in the best way. But at the same time, is always ready to go, can drop in like the most professional and simultaneously like a spinning top in the best way. And Nan is just this grounded force, and like it's there's so much of who we are in these characters, and I think after 31 episodes, the writers really got a gauge for how we all kind of settle in and where we would land on the same side versus different sides, right? And I think the only thing that doesn't really make it on screen that much is how much shit Ernie talks, because it's a lot.
That's awesome.
And if he's shot his coverage and it's late in the night and it's just us on camera, he's not giving you that line. It's gonna be nonsense. Whatever it's gonna be. And he's just screwing with you. And like one time he like fake died it was just nonsense. It was nonsense that he brings. So that's like the only thing that people don't really see, because his character has to be so, grounded. But when he gets to like make a joke, like when he like is messing with Ian about, what is this? A quantum balloon day? Like whatever like nonsense he gets to say. It's just because it's so good, because they're like, that's Ernie. That is Ernie.
That's awesome.
It's very close. Yeah. And it's super fun. And hopefully in a season 3, that's what I'd love to see. I'd love to see Ben and Addison come down on different sides of things and then have holographic support and crosstalk about that. Because I feel like Ian's going to come down on the Ben side 9 times out of 10. And I feel like Nanrissa is going to come down on the Addison side, or Jen's going to come down on the Addison side 9 times out of 10. So like kind of seeing where those things go in and out, I think would be a dynamic that we've never gotten to play out in the leaps before. It's always had to be split in HQ. So maybe yoking that could be even more fun. I don't know.
Absolutely. It's funny because a lot of the speculation, that I've had and that I've seen, online has gone more towards like what types of situations, Ben and Addison would find themselves in. Right. But a conversation that I even had recently, somebody, they were like, oh, well, I think, Janice should come back, be on the show full time and be the observer or whatever. And it's like, well, that's cool. But I think that the greater opportunity exists to have everyone participate in that, and I just think that it would be, again, we've already seen this story, which makes sense because that's what the story was about, especially for the first season, of Ben out there alone, his only connection being Addison, and then of course we got some great opportunities to see like Jen or Ian, in there, and then in season 2, we got to see kind of everybody have that opportunity, even Tom have that opportunity to be the hologram for a little bit. But I just think that in a way, season 3 presents an even greater opportunity to focus on the team and to be able to see this ensemble, working together in ways that, we haven't previously been able to really see, because there are now 2 of you out there, which is fucking awesome. So I want to go back just real quick though, because one of the things that I loved about the last 5 episodes, 4 episodes especially, but I think that off the cuff obviously laid a lot of groundwork, especially with that final scene, as Addison tells Ben about what's going to happen with I almost said Jeffrey, with Josh, and his death, and so it certainly kind of really lights that fuse that carries us through the last 4 episodes. Episode 11, The Outsider, is such a beautiful episode in so many ways, and I think Nadine Ellis was just one of the most phenomenal guest stars that y'all have had. She was so good. I'm so glad I got to talk to her. But of course, I mean, one of the heart. There were multiple beating hearts in this episode as far as I'm concerned, but one of the hearts of the episode was sort of I hesitate to use the word reconnection, but I will, reconnection between Addison and Ben, and seeing the way that they were working together and sharing some of these moments. Can you talk a little bit about the work that went into that? Because I know that the last time that we spoke, you had talked about the fact that there was a moment during Lonely Hearts Club, 4 episodes in, where you kind of had to say goodbye to Ray, and it felt very real to you. It felt very real, like sort of like, all right, bye friend, I'll miss you. And now you're getting this opportunity to really reconnect, as characters, but spending some time together, as actors, that isn't necessarily just about, you got to go do this thing and then do this thing, and having those conversations. Can you talk a little bit about that work and any prep, that you and Ray might have done for those scenes?
Well, 11, 12, 13 were easily my favorite run of the whole season.
Yeah.
The whole both seasons, I would say. Because of exactly what you said, like right in episode 11, the reconnection is the right word. We went from, yeah, I was back in the leaps by episode 8, but there was this like chasm still. It was way more professional than it was anything else.
Yeah.
And that's okay, right? But I do think episode 11 is really when the just honesty started again. I finally was started to be like, Addison was honest with Ben about what has been going on, and like the pretense finally started to drop, and like you said, like this show is, Addison in particular has been having to go on this journey, and it's always around the leap. It's always around like, we can't talk about that right now because like this guy's about to blow up a building, or this is happening, or
Right.
you're about to die, or that kid's about to die. Yeah, like it just ain't nobody got time for that. And and now we did in fact have time for it. And the episode was us as a team. Like that could have been on a different show. Like the fact that we weren't physically in the same environment really didn't play much of a factor anymore because it was research. And you can research as a hologram, right? So you ended up in these great moments, and it was just one of my favorite episodes. And I also think it was like a bit of a taste of what's to come, in the sense, hopefully, in the sense that like you see two fully operating people, come together and to work on something without the complications that there always seem to be. So it was a very fun episode to read. It was an incredibly fun episode to shoot. Nadine was spectacular. It's so important when you have a guest, when you have a episode, especially like that, which is so guest star dependent.
Yeah.
It was Nadine's movie for sure.
Right.
And she crushed it. I want to work with her for the rest of my life. Like she's just very good. And on set is amazing. But yeah, I mean, the other half of the story was us, and it finally got to be us. It was, and it was fun. It was definitely like a reconnection with an old friend, both for Addison and for Caitlin. I had been on, again, we'd been on set. So Ray and I are always great. But, as characters, we finally got to kind of step towards a more connected place. And it was really cool. And it really set up the next two, because like we didn't have to talk about it in episode 11 then, or 12, when in Towering Inferno, right? Hannah's back. We're dealing with a lot of things. And what was nice is because we had so much in Nadine's episode that just got to be with us. And so I don't know, in like a weird way, it also helped Addison be more connected with Hannah, because I think she felt more connected with Ben, and so I don't know, it all worked in this really beautiful way. Probably because we have really, really smart writers.
Yeah, it's funny, speaking of the smart writers, there were a couple of writers that I spoke to, kind of off the record, but they both mentioned about how that scene between Ben and Addison, when they're sitting down and Ben's drinking after things have kind of just blown up in their face, and Addison tells Ben, I got engaged and then I got not engaged, and that's one of their favorite scenes, like, period, of the show. Like, just that is one of their favorite scenes of the show, because it is just so real and so honest, and just this wonderful opportunity to see these two people reconnect based off of that honesty. It's a running theme today. And how, you know, how important that is, and how when you get to see that, it's so immediately like it becomes like tangible. You know, you can almost hold it in your hand and just really feel it. And I think that it was such an incredibly important scene for the series. You know, not just the season, not just the episode, not just what was to come next, but just for the series as a whole, because throughout the course of season 1, you know, we never really got any moments like that. You know, there were moments where the two of you were able to, like, after, you know, Ben started to get his memory back and that sort of stuff, there were certainly moments where there was some connection and that sort of stuff, but it always felt like there was something else. There was something else that had to be dealt with. There's something else that had to be done. And so for that moment when it didn't feel like there was anything else that had to be done, and just to see that was incredibly powerful. And I love what you said about how you connected it to Addison's perspective on Hannah as well, because then going into the next episode, you know, one of my favorite scenes of the show, bar none, without a doubt, is the scene between you and Hannah when she's trapped under the rubble. That scene is flippin' fantastic. And I love so much. Again, it was one of those opportunities, like I mentioned earlier with episode 10, to just really see you as the actor, like, acting, you know, between the lines, like not, you know, not out there in 11, like delivering some of this amazing, you know, honesty and truth with Ben, right? But like in this episode, it's just you know, she can't hear you, she can't see you, you know, and yet you still have to have this conversation basically. It's just such a beautiful scene. I mean, again, probably one of my favorites of the entire show. Can you talk a little bit about that scene?
One of my favorites to shoot as well. First of all, Eliza is special.
Yeah.
And at this point, I mean, at this point, it's a dead horse, but she's just different. And I've learned so much from her, both as an actress and just as a person, like how to be on, like, all of it. She's just a different breed. I think she's going to have her own show again very shortly, like very, very shortly. Something is just so switched on there. And then to have, we had discussed at length, we didn't want this to be a weird love triangle. We didn't want Team Hannah versus Team Addison. Like, we also didn't want girls who watch this to have to pick. Like, I think we grew up in a time where, like, you know, we all grew up watching One Tree Hill, and like you had to be like Team Peyton or team, like, and we're over it, and no one, like, we're over it. And to have these just women being in this conversation with each other, genuinely caring about the outcome of each other's lives and being connected through something much deeper than happenstance or location. And you know, I don't know if I'm ever going to get a scene like that again in my life, but what a special person to share that with, to get to do that with Eliza Taylor. And also Eliza's my friend now, like, deeply. I very much like we hang out. We went to the screening together. I drove, like, you know, like she's awesome. My friend, which is amazing. And I just got to, but like, I'm a big fan. So I just got to watch my friend do a great job. And like, I knew the take they were going to use, because she's there. And then this little tear just pops off the bridge of her nose. And I was like, well, that's your take, baby girl. That's going to be the one they're going to put on TV. And then we sat together at the screening, and at the end of the episode, that episode, when I say goodbye and like, tell Hannah thank you, she looked over and gave my hand a squeeze, because she thought I did a good job with that. And then when she, you know, when she was doing another part that I thought she just crushed, I'd squeeze her hand. And it was just fun to have. We're just fans, just like, it's just to be supportive fans of each other is so nice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's essential sometimes to making like great work. You know, when you can sit there and watch your scene partner and just be like, You're so good. I love you so much.
So good.
And I just want to keep doing this forever. Like, let's never stop, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah. I totally get that. One of the things that's amazing about that scene, you know, and you tapped into this too, is that there is like this respect and this understanding that passes between these two characters in that moment. And
Yeah.
it is different from a lot of what we see, frankly, on network television with dealing with women. You know, it's not something that we often get to see. And I don't know, I appreciated it so much that there was, that it wasn't just a tender moment, that there was this, just that there was kind of like this yeah, that mutual kind of understanding and respect of one another that I really, really appreciated. And it sounds like, while yeah, that's on the page, that it was also these two human beings getting a chance to work together and do that scene together. Would you agree with that?
I think so. Yeah. I think we were always, from the second we heard it was going to exist, we were very excited about it. And, you know, Eliza has been on enough sets to understand, you know, how everything, the dynamics of everything. And I think she also was, we haven't spoken about it, and I'll ask her about it one day, probably directly after this, because now I've said it on a podcast. But I think she was sensitive to the fact that I might have been, like, there's a version of me that could have felt like she was coming on to replace me. The internet certainly reflected that.
Sure.
And, you know, especially like, you know, same race, same, like, there's so many things that's like, oh, like, I was the season 1 thing and she's the season 2 thing. And she, I think, I don't know if she anticipated that, but she had always made it such a big point to be so respectful of the show and what we had done already, and introduced herself the second she met me. And there was just so much. She handled it so beautifully. I was too stupid to know anything. I was just like, hi, it's an actor. Like, I was 18, 19, 20 episodes deep at this point, being like, I'm just holding on for my life right now. But, you know, now again, reflecting on it and seeing what a pro she is, I think she probably was a step ahead of me on, like, you might not feel anything right now, but maybe one day you will. And so I think, you know, there was just how she handled it was perfect. And again, I'm like, you know, there's a part golden retriever in me for sure. So, like, you know, it exists. It's okay. It's not all of me, but you know, I'm 20% golden retriever. So I was just like, hi, are you and luckily she was.
I mean, I love that. And you know, one of the things that Hannah says, and Dean said this a while back, I think when we talked about Nomads, you know, that idea that love is infinite, and that I think there are people out there that have a hard time conceptualizing or accepting the idea that not only is it possible to love many people, but that it's okay to love many people, that it's not some sort of, you know, taboo. And I'm not sitting here like saying like everybody should be polyamorous or anything like that. You're like, I'm not, it's not about that.
Absolutely not.
It's something deeper than that. And it's the idea that I think for the way that these characters worked, and not just Hannah and Addison, but Ben and Tom, and even just everybody on the show, and the way that these relationships are handled, and certainly with what we see in Against Time, when Beth and Janice, you know, come and kind of tell the whole story, that idea that, like, that the love that exists is so much bigger than any one person. And I think that one of the things that's been lovely about the effect of this season on the fandom and the community, and some of the comments that I've seen online, is that, yes, you're always going to have the haters. Nothing we can do about them, right? But I see more and more people that, frankly, were towards the middle, or maybe even a little bit on that hating side during season 1, that have gone towards the I like this, and I like the story that they've told, and I like these people, and I like these characters, and even as it relates to the relationships between, you know, Ben and Hannah and Ben and Addison, and then eventually obviously Addison and Hannah, which I think is incredibly important to the story as well. I was told that once upon a time there was an idea to have Addison receive a letter from Hannah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming you've read the letter. You know about the letter.
I have
Yeah.
read that letter.
So can you tell me, because it's not something that we've talked a lot about on the show. I've read the letter, and I'm curious. When did you read the letter, and what were your initial reactions to that letter?
I read it in Towering Inferno, the day of or the day before we shot the scene together.
Okay.
And honestly, at that point, nothing in that letter surprised me.
Sure.
If anything, the letter, it almost had evolved even past that. Because in that letter there was some mention of, you know, I thought I was gonna not like you, or you know, I was looking for a
Right.
reason not to. And I think by the end of how we shot that and who Hannah was and what Eliza brought to it, I don't even think that line would have applied anymore. I think
Yeah.
there was, you know, I think at that point, Addison and Hannah had a relationship. It wasn't she wasn't just you know, the first girl Ben loved. It was something different by then. But it was so beautiful to see what seed she had been planted by, and like the love and maturity and I don't know, humanity that the writer had written that with. And you know, that's the kind of thing that you're like, well, that's why we have a nice show. That's why we have a nice show with nice people and nice characters, is because when you conceive a character with that kind of depth and beauty, you know, you're starting out in a great place. You can only go up from
Yeah.
there. And they did only go up from there. By
Right.
the
Because
character
again,
arc was almost better.
absolutely, because and I think part of that is also it goes to exactly what you're saying, because it's not only you're able to start from this place of like of beauty, but you're able to keep yourself open to the possibility that more exists, and to see like what Eliza was doing with the role, and to see and to make those adjustments. And by the time we get to Nomads, when you know she's all like, hi, you know, you must be at it. It's like yeah, yes, yeah, of course, and it does, you know, move past where it had started, which is always great, because you know, I think it's one of the things that also you get. So much has been made over the past 15 years or so about like prestige television in particular, right? You know, you've got your Game of Thrones type shows or whatever, and they're great, they're amazing. I'm not denying that, but one of the things that they don't have is the opportunity to really truly make adjustments within that like block of episodes that they're shooting, because oftentimes they are like with Game of Thrones, for instance, they might be shooting something for episode 6 before they ever shoot something for episode 1, so they're
Yeah,
locked
it's
in,
all
like they've
locations.
right, so they've got to tell that story. But with this show, the thing that's so amazing is you get the opportunity to kind of feel how things are going along the way and make those little adjustments that still honor maybe that initial thread, you know, that you want to pay off in the end, but you've allowed that flexibility to kind of like to stay open to the possibility that something better is out there, that something more, you know, right for this story that's being told is out there. And I just think that that's one of the things about this season in particular that paid off so well, is it's like it's clear that there was a thread, it's clear that there was like an established like this is the story we want to tell, but there also were the ability to kind of flow along the way and make those adjustments to help to tell and support that story in even more magnificent ways than what was initially thought up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a combination of writers and what who Eliza is and what she brought. Like, there's just something you to relegate that performance or person or character to to maintaining any sort of hidden secret jealousy or something like that, I think is just not true.
Yeah.
You know, I think she had this deep acceptance that kept showing up, that it would be silly that maintained it, you know, that just wasn't who it was. So, you know, and we have
Yeah.
a phenomenal writing staff that adjusts with that rather than,
Absolutely.
you know, forcing a preconceived idea. It's, you know, that's Martin Dean and everybody else. It's just a special group.
Well,
it's just a really special group.
It is incredibly special, and I feel so fortunate to have gotten to have conversations with so many people because it's easily identifiable. Like, I mean, I thought that early on, right? Like when I had my first conversation with Dean, I was just sort of like, there's something different about this. Like, I don't know shit about this, right? Like, I've never been on a TV series set, right? Like I've done a couple pilots or whatever, but like, you know, I've done like stuff like that, but I've never done this. Like, I don't know this, but I've done enough theater and I've worked in creative environments. This feels different. This feels special. And the more I talked to people, the more and more that became clear. And it was just sort of like, this is special. And it continues to be that way. And you get that sense even from like the guest stars that come in, right? Like, you know, again, it's just sort of like, wow, you know, they even feel that way. You know, that's one of the things that Nadine said. Like Nadine said in our interview that like she couldn't believe it. Like she had heard, like there had been a couple of, you know, people that had said things to her, like when she was in her makeup trailer and people like, have you met Ray yet? Have you met, you know, and all this sort of stuff. She's like, well, I got to meet Ray. And like, and it was like, and she, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but she said that like, he was everything that she thought that he would be and more based off of what she said. And like, and it's not just him, right? Like it's you, it is Dean, it is Martin, it is, you know, it's Drew, it's Shakina, it's everybody involved. And I think that it's so incredible to see that. And I think that one of the other things too is it's like it wasn't just you know, in my opinion, it wasn't just the changes or whatever, that the way that Hannah was written around, but I think it's you too, because what we see in the season finale in Against Time, it just feels like such a genuine payoff for everything that's come before. You know, I had conversations with Drew early on before I'd seen the episode, and I didn't know anything about it. Like that was something that everybody kept top secret. Like I've gotten some stuff out of people before, and that's cool, but like this was something that like nobody told me anything. And so as we got closer and closer, like one of the things that he kept saying is like, you're really going to want to go back and like watch the whole season. And then I watched the episode, and I remember I talked to him immediately afterwards, and I was like, I don't just want to go watch the whole past season. I want to go back and watch the whole series, because this feels like we've just seen like Addison's origin story. Like we've seen what builds her into being a leaper, because in that very first episode, you know, you say, I was supposed to be the leaper. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know if I felt like she was ready to be the leaper. And then by the time we get to the end of Against Time and she steps out of that imaging chamber, it's like, yep, yeah, she's ready. Like she knows. And part of that is the scene where, you know, you're driving to Hannah and Jeffrey's house. And the scene in the car is phenomenal, by the way. And echoes so lovely the stuff that happens in episode 11 when you two are sitting on the floor talking. But getting there, and, you know, Ben's supposed to smash this computer. And as much is to be made, rightfully so, of the way that Ben saves Jeffrey / Gideon by showing him how to like save a life, how to save the day, how to be a hero. I feel like in a way there was this element of him also showing Addison that and reaffirming that for her. What do you think about that?
I think that's right. I think Addison's military background and how she viewed the world, there's a utilitarianism to her that does not exist in Ben. Ben is like, he is the Sam Beckett. He is the, like, when you lead with hope and love and let people make their choices from that, the world will be better. Addison, I don't think inherently fell on that side. I think she fell on the side of, this we know will make a difference, especially with the fact that Jen was killed. I think, I think Addison is more loyal than she is fair. And, at that point, maybe without Jen being dead in a bag, it'd be a little different. She'd be like, okay, maybe we shouldn't ruin this kid's life. At that point, I think she was like, smash it. Let's go. Like, this is how we do this. And Ben kind of doing what he did help her see that you don't have to pull the trigger to make a difference. I still do think that there's a fundamental difference between how they're always going to approach things, which I think is a good thing. I think there's a positivity to the fact that Ben and Addison aren't always going to agree on the best way to do something. And I think that what's going to be really interesting is when Ben has to learn that sometimes you do have to make a hard decision. And even though it doesn't make you feel good, it's ultimately going to make everybody else in a much better place, right? So I'm excited for the opportunity for Addison to kind of have to be a little harder. And I think that there's room for that, right? Without being a bad person, or, you know what I mean? Like, you have to do it in a very special way. But yeah, I mean, that's the show. The show is, if you lead with love and hope, then the world is a better place. And sometimes you have to let bad things happen, or risk letting bad things happen, because it's not your place to control that. And that's kind of what Ben said to Gideon, and then even showed Addison and the rest of the world, right, with his choice. So.
Something else that happens in 212, to take a completely different spin on things, that was kind of cool to see. And this is something that, again, when I talked to Drew, he was like, oh, I've been waiting for that, is when you disarm one of Gideon's goons. Talk about that, because it seemed like, I mean, it's cool. Like, I can't find any other word for it. Like, it's a cool scene.
It's a cool scene. And I loved it, because I feel like, right, they looked for someone like me with my background, or Addison's background. They wanted somebody who could do this. I got to do a little bit of it in the season finale. And honestly, one of my favorite parts to ever play in this show was younger Addison.
Yeah.
Because she was making decisions in a different way, just like in episode 11, when she wasn't kind of attached to a guy. Like, you operate a little differently when, like, I'm on my own train tracks right now. And she got to be Addison with the guns and the things, and like, no, I know how to do this. And so they cast a role, they wrote a role for somebody who's kind of an action person, a man, a woman of action. And then they put her in a hologram position. So you never got to see what she's good at. Yes, she can talk you through a crazy situation. Yes, like, she can handle when a lot of things are coming at her. She can be, a steady voice. There's a lot of things that she is good at, that she, that is different between how the Observer operates in this show versus the original show, where Al, he kind of came in to give some information, have a scene, and then he's mostly out of there for, like, the thick of it, except for a couple moments, right? Unless he's actually affecting the outcome. He's stepping in to fly the plane. He's stepping in to help with the, like, those types of things.
Right.
Where it's different here, where, I'm crazily similar to my old world, where, like, I'm on the shoulder in your ear. I'm letting you know, like, someone's a kilometer behind you, someone's over here, like, that's kind of the role that she's in. And so, again, I think the writers, just like episode 11, this is what you could see for season 3, this partnership. They gave Addison a moment to do something that, like, Ben wouldn't / couldn't do. Ben can throw a punch. Ben can get himself out of a scrape, like for sure. You know what I mean? And Ray's a phenomenal physical actor. He's so athletic that sometimes he has to like tone it down a bit because he, like, you know what I mean? Like, bro, like calm down. You're not supposed to look like a professional sports star. But Addison's good at that stuff. And so I think it also gave audiences like a little bit of a taste of like, this is the character that she's been, but it's kind of been behind this veil. And now that she's in the leaps is the character that you're going to see a lot more of, which is, I think, really cool. I mean, it's not very often on a show, especially a network show, that an actor gets to do a different job. And I do. And it's, you know, very, very grateful for it. And, you know, very hopeful that we get to do it.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, one of the things that's kind of interesting to me too is I don't know if we talked about this before or not, but in the original pilot script, Addison was actually written as having been a former medic in the Army, which I thought was so interesting. And obviously, like the adjustments that were made once you were brought in make total sense and kind of speak to what we were talking about earlier, with being open to that sort of stuff. But I agree, and I think that one of the things that is incredibly exciting about the possibility of season 3 is that there are so many different types of situations. Even looking back on the previous 31 episodes, imagine, you know, if Addison had been there physically, right? Like how things might have been a little bit different, and just the different combinations. And I want to get to that in a minute, but before we do, I definitely want to talk about the final scene of season 2. It is just, I mean, it's breathtaking. It induces all the feels, as the kids say. It is, I mean, it is an incredibly powerful scene. And it's one of those moments, again, that just feels so palpable, and everything is so perfect about it. You know, from the music, the way your hair is styled, I mean, everything about it.
I'm going to post that next. But, tell me, I will. Tell me when you post this. Okay. I'll post my hair transformation, because the girls, I have a whole time lapse, and don't worry, I'm going to do it now that you know.
That's awesome.
I'm so
yeah,
I'm going to cry.
I mean, the first thing I said is I just said it looks like Caitlin stepped out of Casablanca. Like, it's just so perfect. And then, you know, and then you look over and you see Ben there, and, you know, Ray, when I spoke to him, you know, it was funny because he balanced, I think, the emotion of the scene also with a sense of humor about physically the idea that you, even as actors, much less as the characters, didn't know how to touch one another.
No, like, wait. Like, it was, yeah. And there was a moment where I was like, is this going to go bad? Do we not know what to do actually at all? Because it's so weird. Like, you know, she touches Jen and Ian and Magic all the time, and there's a comfortability to how they touch each other. And like,
well, there's even that really beautiful scene in O Ye of Little Faith where the two of you got to touch one another a little bit.
In the dream sequence?
In the dream sequence. But that's also been, you know, 20 plus episodes ago. So
and they cut a lot out of that. It was a little hotter. But I get it. But, you know, it was cool. And I was playing a different thing then, because I was playing Dream Addison, which allowed me to touch him in ways. I don't think it even made it, but I think there was a moment where I like ran my hand across his chest, which is like not something real Addison would probably do. I mean, she wouldn't, maybe like an intimate moment in like having coffee, but not, you know, trying to sort out a problem. She's probably not like draped all over him, but Dream Addison could do that. Right. And that was really fun in a different way. And I think Ray and I both played with like, I was like almost an antagonist, because he was like, what is happening? You know, like it was, I had to, my motivation was so different because I was not real Addison. I was Dream Addison, which was so fun. Yeah. I want to do a whole movie like that. That is so fun. You just get this like no rules. There are no rules. You get to, I get to decide what your subconscious thought of me is. That's fun. Yeah. Right. Buckle up, kid. but anyway, yes. So there was a moment of like, oh, I don't know how to touch you. But that quickly went away. And we were like, wait, hey, like, we're good? Okay, let's try this again. And everything about that scene was amazing. The background was phenomenal. There was the guy that ran into me. We had very multiple iterations of how hard he ran into me, and at one point he like bounced me right off camera, like,
oh no,
like right off camera. I had to like, it was like boom, and then I like jump back in. Like, I'm here. It was, and Ray's just dying over there because I'm never getting wrecked in the scenes,
right?
So there was some levels of just fun that we were having, but I mean, everything about that day, from the moment they did my hair and I went and changed and I was in a period piece, how the crew treated me was different. How I got out of the van at set, and Ray kind of looked me up and down in the good way. It was just like, welcome. Like, this is different for you, and everybody respects it. And Chris Grismer was just like in the most respectful way. It was like, you look beautiful. And it was just said as a friend and a director, and and Trailer, our AD, first AD, who I know you've heard about. He's just amazing. You should interview him at some point, because he's
I would love
character.
To.
He's amazing. He just kind of came over and like put his arm around me, and there was just this like feeling of like, you did it. We're gonna do this with you. And it was just, and Ray came, like, wanted to watch my eyeball shot just because he just to support me, right? Like, just, there was this from the hair and makeup to costumes to like, what do you need? Like, there was this support that all kind of coalesced to make this moment special. To the background, like, I don't know why, but it was one of the most special moments I've ever shot. I'll remember it forever. And everybody on set knew something was happening. Something special was about to happen. Something different was about to happen. And I could play that like a movie. I remember how it felt. I remember where I stepped. I remember running off. I remember how it felt to smile when I was running off. Like, I remember all of it, because there was just this respect and love for this moment, because we all understood something big was happening.
Yeah.
And we were never going to do it again. This is the only time we get to do it. And we did, and it worked great. And also, I know I talk about Ray a lot. And, all the things that he does perfectly, and we all get it. Right. But there was a moment where we're hugging, right? So I kind of melt into him, and he picks it up, and it was this beautiful moment between actors and friends. But hugging is actually kind of tricky on set sometimes when you're shooting it, because especially when you're hugging somebody who's taller than you, you can lose your face, right? So I'm hugging and my shoulder goes. I hope I can get through this. And they have to come close on my face, because you need to read what I'm going through, just like you have to read what he's going through. But he knew he was taller than me, and nobody asked him to do it. I never said anything. I just, I try and get up on my tiptoes a little bit, because we're on eye coverage, so it's not getting our full bodies, so I can like cheat myself up. And Ray, just simply knowing when the camera was going to push in, just dropped his shoulder, just so that, just to make space for me. And that is who Ray is.
I am so grateful
that I get the chance to talk about these things and hear these stories like this. Not because of Quantum Leap, not because of, you know, this show that I've talked about for like 7 years now, but because I love this art form so much. I love, I love actors so much,
Yeah.
and when it's good and when it's right and when people are being generous and thoughtful and honest, it really does, in my opinion, just it invests the work with something so special. And I think it's one of those things sometimes that, you know, not everyone really understands. You know, it's not just about like learning lines and feeling things, you know, that it is about that generosity and that trust and that kindness and creating those safe spaces. And I think that, you know, how wonderful to have someone that is able to create that space, you know, right? I love hearing that. Thank you. So just a couple more questions before
Yeah.
we get out of here. You know, we've talked a little bit about it, but I'm curious for you, what do you want to do in season 3? When do you want to go? Where do you want to go? What kind of combinations do you want to see?
I want to go everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked a little bit about it, but there's so many opportunities that present themselves with two leapers, more holograms. Do we even show up in the same place? Do we show up in the same place in different time periods and have dual objectives? What happens when we have seemingly opposing objectives? What happens when one of us seems to be in danger? How does the other one react to it? How will we stack that up against the leap? How, like, I think, you know, when just in my head, trying to understand the difference between, you know, Addison and Ben, I when it comes to if there's a choice between the leaper host, the you know, the person and Ben, I think Addison's going to protect Ben. And so what does that do to the, you know, like now he has to deal with somebody who might be working against him for him in a way.
And the opposite could be true as well, right?
And the opposite could be true. Yeah, absolutely. When can we not help each other? When do one of us have to be one place and the other one somewhere completely different? There's just so many opportunities, and it's like a brand new stinking show.
Yeah.
And it's like to be able to do that is to change the rules is just, you know, it's what we can do on Quantum Leap. So you know, it's a lot to lose. So I'm trying to kind of temper my own hopes, because, you know, decisions get made for reasons that have nothing to do with my feelings, unfortunately.
I just say it isn't so.
Yeah, it's nonsense. That was not as advertised as when I was a kid. I really, you know, my feelings really went a long way in decision making. But yeah, so there's so many things I'd love to see. I'd love to see Scott. You know, there's a lot of things I'd love to see, and I hope we get the chance to get there.
Me too. Yeah, I've been wrapping up, and it's interesting because I feel like more than anyone, quite frankly, that I've spoken to, asking this question and talking about this feels very different because of some of the conversations that you and I have had. And I know how incredibly moved I was to see your message honoring Matt Dale after he suddenly passed.
Yeah.
And I know that there have been moments in these final 5 episodes when, the final two in particular, when Matt was on people's minds, on the people who were making this show were thinking about him. And I think about him all the time, and I miss him dearly. And one of the things, that I've tried to do to honor him and keep his memory alive is talk about what inspires people. Because Matt has certainly helped to inspire me. And, I've told this story before, but when Georgina Riley was on the show for the first time, she was scheduled to be on the show, weeks in advance, the day after I had learned about Matt's passing. And I remember emailing her and just saying like, hey, I don't know about this. And she was like, no, we should do this. And I'm so glad that we did. And one of the things that we talked about was like, inspiration. So, what did Matt mean to you? And then I'll get to my final question.
Well, hold on. Ask your final question.
Okay. What inspires you?
They're going to be a very similar answer, and that's why I wanted you to ask it. I was a kid on a couch who watched her whole life fall apart with her parents and a lot of other things. And I turned to television. I turned to people on screens that made me feel like there was more out there. And so it was people like Matt. Because I feel like I got here so that those people like Matt could keep dreaming and keep turning to screens. In the best way, not in the escapist, awful way in the social media era, but to watch somebody do better for themselves and for the people around them. And for people like Matt who really care about that stuff. Not everybody needs to care about television. Not everybody needs to care about Quantum Leap. Not like, it's okay. Everybody has their things, but I really learned how to dream by watching stories. And I appreciated what it gave me in my life. And Matt appreciated it as well. And so what inspires me is that maybe all of this work and stress and being on the bubble and, no's and yeses and comments online and like all of that might be worth it because somebody might watch from a couch one day and feel like Matt felt. So that inspires me.
Well, I will never get tired of hearing answers to that question. I have to find lots of more people to keep asking that question to. I love that, and I appreciate it so much. And I think that, one of the things that I've personally experienced over the past year and a half is a genuine feeling that the connection that I've had to this show and the opportunity to speak to you and others has inspired me to not just do this, right? But to, to keep going out there and auditioning and telling stories, and it's connected in a way with me to allow me to be just more who I am. And there have been a lot of times over the past few weeks where I've been tired and working so hard and doing 10 hours worth of podcasting in a week because the finale's airing, and I'm trying to talk to people and do all these things, and I'm in rehearsals, and I'm trying to be a parent, and I'm trying to be a partner, and I'm trying, and the wellspring of inspiration that I find from you and people like you that I get the chance to speak with is so invigorating. And so I just have to say, mission accomplished. You are already doing that. And if that is part of what inspires you, then keep doing it, because you will keep doing it, and other people will feel the same way that I feel. So thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
You're welcome. All right, so before we go through a box of tissues, we'll get out of here, and yes, we'll say goodbye for now. But as I have said multiple times, that I am just so gracious for the opportunity to talk to you and to ask these questions and have these conversations, because each one of them has been so special. And I want you to know that no matter what happens, I hope that we continue to get the chance to do this, because whatever it is that you're doing, I will be paying attention.
Thank you, Sam.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you for doing
All
this.
right. Yeah. Thank you. So that's it for now, fellow travelers. Thank you so much to Caitlin Bassett once again, and thank you all for taking the time to listen and give up your time for us. We'll be back soon with much more. But in the meantime, take care of yourselves, take care of one another, stay safe out there, and just like Addison would, always leap responsibly.